Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
Hillary Clinton wants to abolish it, believe me. She wants to abolish our Second Amendment.
I think they didn't deny it. I don't think anybody denied it.
Other presidents did not call. They'd write letters, and some presidents didn't do anything.
Many people have come out and said I'm right.
You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Hello and welcome to Fallacious Trump, the podcast where we use the insane ramblings of Vladimir Gluten to explain logical fallacies. I'm your host, Jim.
And I'm your other host, Mark. A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning that results in bad or invalid arguments. And the logical fallacy we're looking at this week is the halo effect. Quite enjoying Vladimir Gluten.
I enjoyed Vladimir Gluten,
because it's very pleasant to say, but it also conjures up an image of sort of that kind of stodgy,
doughy dictator, yeah.
Exactly. That's also trying to stick to other dictators and still failing to do it because he's just been identified as the gluey thing that he is.
Yeah, and some people are very allergic.
Yes, intolerant. I think a lot of people
absolutely.
are intolerant. Yes.
So, the halo effect.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones that's really a cognitive bias rather than a fallacy per se. You'll find it more commonly on lists of cognitive biases. But as we learned in episode 50 from Bo Bennett, cognitive biases often lead to fallacies. And when this is employed in any attempt to frame a situation or make an argument or provide evidence, then it becomes fallacious. And the halo effect was first named by Edward Thorndike, a researcher in 1920, who wrote an article called A Constant Error in Psychological Ratings. What he did was got commanding officers in the military to assess their soldiers, or cadets really under their command, 137 cadets, based on a variety of different qualities which are independent from each other.
Right.
Voice, physique, energy, neatness, loyalty, selflessness, cooperation, dependability, leadership skills, things like that.
Right.
A variety of different traits.
Yeah.
And what he found was that there was far more correlation than you would expect just by chance. So if a cadet was rated highly for having a good physique, they also were rated higher on leadership skills and neatness and loyalty and things like that than you would expect just randomly in the population. He called it the halo error because he saw one positive trait giving a perception of an increased rating in different qualities that aren't related to that. It's been tested in various ways since, looking at things from attractiveness to trustworthiness and things like that based on single traits that people ascribe to an individual and then asking them questions that are completely unrelated to that trait, and they are rated higher if the initial impression they get of the person is high than if the impression they get is low. If they're only shown, for example, a picture of either an attractive or an unattractive person, they will rate an essay they think they wrote as a higher quality essay if the person is more attractive.
Wow.
And that kind of thing.
It feels a bit like the Victorian phrenology stuff, doesn't it? Or the people that were obvious criminals just from the way that they look, the kind of rogues gallery that you could categorize people as bad just because of the way they look.
Yeah, I mean, the old, your eyes are too close together kind of thing is a classic one of these. Of physiognomy, it was called. Phrenology was the kind of bumps in the head. Physiognomy was the idea that you can tell someone's traits from what their face looked like. But yeah, it's really widespread. It's a bias that we all have, that we will get a first impression of a person and then assume things about their traits that we couldn't possibly know based on the first impression that we had.
Because of that.
And it's kind of the don't judge a book by its cover idea. And as we know, Trump has never got past the cover of a book. So he bases everything on his first impression of a person. And to some extent, I wanted to call this kind of subset of it the fuckability fallacy. Because Trump cannot stop talking about how fuckable the various pilots, generals, soldiers that he meets are, to the extent that I made a little compilation of not even all, by no means all of them, but a selection of times that he has described people that he is employing in these stories are highly qualified for their jobs, but focusing weirdly on their appearance.
And I sat with the pilots, the most handsome human beings I've ever seen. It's not my thing, but they're handsome. Not my thing. Not even a little bit, but they are handsome.
I said to my wife and family, look at that guy. He's a great-looking guy, isn't he? He's like central casting. He's like right out of Hollywood. He's a handsome guy. If I was casting a movie for the CIA, I'd put this guy in it. Director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe.
A little bit like Justice Kavanaugh. Really a very fine, high-quality, handsome guy.
Those generals are going to keep us so safe. They're going to have a lot of problems the other side. They're going to look at a couple of them. These are central casting. If I'm doing a movie, I pick you, General. And then they sent their top negotiator, good negotiator, very handsome guy, nice guy, beautiful. It looked like Cary Grant. I met with pilots like beautiful Tom Cruise, but taller. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Handsome, perfect people. Sir, there was something there that was round in form and going like 4 times faster than my super jet fighter plane. I saw him backstage. He's central casting. I'll tell you, every sheriff should look like Eric. The general came in, an Air Force general, great guy, handsome guy. They're all so good looking, these people. I got a call from Katie Britt, a young, just a fantastically attractive person from Alabama. She's a senator. These guys are phenomenal. You got to see what they look like. Everyone's in perfect shape. I look at them, central casting, every one of them. They're great. Thank you, fellas. You could see the pilot, a perfect-looking human being. His co-pilot, everybody was perfect. They were all like movie stars. It's like I could have cast a movie with these guys and nobody would believe it because they were too good-looking.
So in at least one of those instances, he's suggesting that we should trust that these pilots that he's talked to, about the existence of aliens based on how attractive they were.
Whoa.
Based on the fact that they were like good-looking, attractive human beings who told me they'd seen UFOs. Therefore, that kind of attractive person is not going to lie or be wrong, are they? You can just assume that they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But so commonly he talks about just how gorgeous the various pilots or generals he interacts with are.
Is it because he doesn't think he is, or he wants them to say it in return, or he just loves the fact that he has always surrounded himself with good-looking people? Like, that's the only reason he did the Miss Universe competition. And it's just the beauty is good thing, isn't it? If you're beautiful, therefore you're good. So,
it's that. Yes.
Therefore they're bad.
It's his immense shallowness. That's what it is. It's that he can't see past the surface of anything. Shallow.
Yeah.
So, that's what he equates success and quality and trustworthiness and all of those things with being attractive. It's very weird, but frequently it is used as a precursor, or as not even a precursor, as a proxy for this person is qualified to do this job. And also his use of the phrase central casting, he uses it so much because he only has like a 150 word vocabulary. So he constantly talks about casting a movie with people. But central casting is an extras casting agency. It's a very old agency in Hollywood. The meaning of the phrase there, straight out of central casting, basically, is that they are stereotypically like that person. Because if you're casting a newspaperman or a doctor or a grizzled old fisherman or whatever, you go to central casting and you ask for someone who looks like that kind of person, and they will cast that kind of person because it's an extra role and it's not about acting ability, it's about what they look like. Being straight out of central casting means a stereotype. But he doesn't say out of central casting, he describes people as central casting, which is weird as a phrase, doesn't make any sense. But he once learned that is a thing in Hollywood and will not stop saying it.
Unbeknownst to him, he's revealing his ignorance of the cliche, because central casting is they will just get you somebody that looks like that because that's all you need. And that's how he deals with people in office. If they look like they ought to be a general, then I will employ him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not just based on looks, though. Sometimes he'll learn a fact about a person, and that will be the thing that he decides is their key trait that means that they are good at everything. Okay. For example, former reality TV star and current Transport Secretary Sean Duffy, who years ago Trump learnt a fact about, and frequently still brings it up.
Sean now is working on the Reciprocal Trade Act. If they charge us, we charge them. Very simple. They charge us, we charge them. And I think you're doing great on it, Sean, and I appreciate it, man. Great job. But he's the tree climbing, these characters that go up the trees and they come down. He said, no, going up isn't the hard part, it's coming down. Because if you miss, you're dead. And he said he's missed about 4 times, but he's the 5-time world champion going up a tree. Did anybody know that? See, to me, that means something, because being a champion is something, and that's one that is tough stuff and dangerous stuff.
So we actually did use that clip, or part of that clip, in a previous fake news.
Yeah.
Because I do love the bit where he says, if you miss, you're dead, and he's missed 4 times.
Yeah, and he's missed 4 times, yeah, exactly. But he does a little sneaky segue from champion. That's a champion thing. And if you're a champion, it doesn't matter
so that's,
you might be a...
That, I am absolutely sure, is 100% of the reason why he's currently the Transportation Secretary, is because Trump is aware that he's a world champion in climbing up and down trees. Of course, down as well. He says, both up and down. You have to come down. That's how that works. Otherwise, you just live up a tree.
You're still up there. Yeah. There's no kind of transport secretary that's going to be any good at one-way journeys.
No.
That's...
But it's not true that he's a 5-time world champion.
Right, no.
He's a 3-time champion. But he's a lumberjack. He did speed tree climbing and was very good at it. And it doesn't mean he's good at transportation.
No.
But as far as Trump is concerned, that's a thing he learned about this guy. And he was like, this guy, he can go up and down trees as fast as you like. Therefore, I will employ him to do other unrelated things, because he'll definitely be good at them.
Because he's been on television and he looks good in a lumberjack outfit. Basically, it's anybody that has been in a YMCA video, construction worker or a pilot or a cop, it'll just employ them.
There's another related effect to the halo effect, which is kind of basically just the negative. It's if you have a negative first impression of someone, then you ascribe other negative traits that are unrelated to them as well. It's sometimes called the horns effect, as a kind of direct correlative to the halo effect. And for Trump, it almost stopped him from hiring John Bolton as his security advisor, because John Bolton has a mustache.
Right.
And Trump didn't like it. In Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury, it talks about how Steve Bannon told Wolff that Trump almost didn't hire John Bolton as National Security Advisor because he couldn't get past the mustache. He said Bolton's mustache is a problem. Trump doesn't think he looks the part. And it is true that John Bolton looks like a photo negative of Borat.
Yeah.
But that isn't what made him a bad National Security Advisor. He was a bad National Security Advisor.
Yeah.
Because he has fucking weird ideas about foreign policy and wars and stuff. But it isn't because of the mustache.
Security and advice.
Yes.
But it's not because of the mustache. Yeah. In the same way that Transportation Secretary, nothing to do with your qualifications of being able to go up and down a pole with spikes on the insides of your boots.
Also, Janet Yellen, as Fed chair, her contract essentially was not renewed. She wasn't chosen as Fed chair again by Trump because she isn't tall enough. That was the reason he gave for not choosing her, because she's 5'3", and he was like, she's not going to be a good Fed chair. So that's why he chose Jerome Powell, who he is still pissed off at, because he won't just raise the interest rates or lower the interest rates depending on what day Trump decides one of those things needs to be done. Yeah. Jerome Powell has actually, paradoxically, because Trump picked him, been a reasonably good Fed chair. But Janet Yellen probably would have been fine, and the fact that she's 5'3" wouldn't have made much of a difference to that.
No, and Trump is pissed that the other guy is not grateful because he recognised that he was taller and gave him the job. And he's just not grateful enough, sufficient to... That's not how quid pro quo works.
And... now is the time, I think, for Mark's British politics corner.
So our first example, obviously, is Boris Johnson, and it is about the era of the Partygate revelations. All of that stuff was coming out, And Peter Bone, MP Peter Bone, who I think we've probably referred to before, who's one of the cheerleaders in the Tory party for Boris at the time, went on to Good Morning Britain, I think, in order to defend Boris over the Partygate revelations.
Let's take just COVID, for instance. I mean, a poor man nearly lost his life fighting to get us through COVID. But we got the first vaccination in the world, thanks to the fact, actually, we're out of the EU, but also because Boris and the government put money into the AstraZeneca vaccine. That's gone to 2.7 billion people across the world, saving millions and millions of lives. And we went through the whole COVID thing. And my goodness, wasn't it nice having Boris on the screen, keeping us happy during that period?
So the halo effect is, well, I think there's two in there. One is he nearly lost his life getting us through the COVID thing, like with all the hard work that he was doing, fighting off the COVID thing on our behalf. No, he got that. He was being stupid, shaking hands with everybody at Royal Ascot, like 3 day or whatever it was, this big sporting event.
Didn't he go around a hospital shaking everyone's hands?
Yeah.
Fucking
and then,
idiot.
So the fact that he got ill and didn't die, that's the thing that really pissed us all off. This guy survived. It's a bit like Trump had the same thing happen to him. He had access to, all of that expensive private medical attention, survived, and that became, he was a proper fighter. He survived. And wasn't it nice having Boris keeping us happy on the screens? well, no. And then the fact that during the entirety of the Partygate thing and the revelations of all of the corruption with the insider dealing for their mates for the COVID PPEs, etc., all of that scandal can be washed aside constantly by, Boris kept saying it, by the three things that they kept doing, which was they got Brexit done. They didn't. They got the first COVID vaccine out because we were no longer in the EU. Well, that's not true. We were still in the European Medical Agency. And it was because we were that we managed to get the vaccines as early as we did. Once we'd left the EU and the European Medical Agency structure, that's why he had to buy a whole bunch more vaccines, not least because the AstraZeneca started getting contraindicated, and then he had to buy a whole bunch more stuff and couldn't get it for some time because we were no longer in the EMA. And despite the fact that the vaccine got rolled out to 2.7 billion people across the world, we were sixth highest in the world vis-a-vis deaths. But we should forget all that and forget the fact that the Queen was sitting on her own in Westminster Abbey at the funeral of Prince Philip whilst he partied in number 10 Downing Street on one occasion, amongst several others. But we should gloss over all of that because he kept us happy on our screens all that time, apparently.
Yeah, I think he's mixing him up with Tiger King.
Yeah, I think that exactly that. Yeah, I mean, they've got similar crazy hair, similar crazy blonde hair. Maybe that was where his mistake was. Yeah. Example number 2 is Nigel Farage standing as the MP for Clacton. And he's a good bloke.
All they do is rob you, basically.
What, the Tories and Labour?
Yeah, they don't do nothing for this country. They're all rich people and they only care about themselves.
Well, Nigel Farage is a former stockbroker, went to private school. Do you not think he's the same?
No, because he still looks after our generation and he's there to help us as well. That's why I'm down here.
But do you think he really cares about Clacton?
Well, I hope so. Otherwise he would have been down here. He'll get my vote.
Yeah, the thing is that Nigel Farage, so there's a lot of recessive R's in Clacton. Nigel Farage, it's not like the other politicians who are only out for themselves. They're rich people, they're only interested in themselves. Nigel Farage is interested in normal blokes, despite the fact that he was privately educated and was a stockbroker and is a rich bloke. And do you think he's interested, and he hopes he's interested in Clacton, but he looks out for the very telling phrase there. He looks after the interests of our generation, of the racists, as we'll hear from the other guy. He's been down here, so that's it. That's all. That's it. He's been to Clacton.
Yeah.
And
I mean, even after he was elected,
Clacton.
he went to Clacton once, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because he had to. I don't know.
Yeah, and then he fucked off
He made all sorts of promises.
The US.
Yeah. So he's gone there, so that makes him somebody that you would vote for, but he hasn't been there since. And despite the fact that he's exactly like the other politicians that are rich and only out for themselves. He's different because he's got the our interests at heart, and you could tell that because if he didn't, he wouldn't have been here. But some people see straight through it.
And he's chosen Clacton because he knows that's where the racists are.
Are you from Clacton?
Yeah, born and bred. And this has always been a Tory town, except from that moment we're in UKIP. But that's why he knew he could win this seat, and he will win this seat.
And do you think he cares about Clacton?
Of course he doesn't. He's here for his own self-worth.
There you go. Brilliant. He knows he could win because this is where the racists are. Yeah, when I looked at this, I thought, well, is that the Horns effect? But it isn't. It's not a fallacy going on there. He's just pointed out what the other guy failed to see.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that, as we learned last September, Nigel Farage said he couldn't hold in-person surgeries in the constituency of Clacton for security reasons. And then Westminster Speaker's office said, no, we didn't say you couldn't do that. And it's probably because since he was elected as an MP, he's been too busy earning £1 million from other jobs.
Yeah, that might be it.
Yeah, because he's a rich person that's only interested in himself. But he's been there, so he'd be worth voting for. The other example was, actually, I kind of opened my research with, well, that whole phenomena of Corbyn was unelectable. There was this attribute that was attached to him, which meant he was unelectable, despite the fact that he was elected leader of the Labour Party twice, and by an increase of the membership by, it became the largest political party with membership. It had like 500,000 members who joined in order to vote Jeremy Corbyn in as leader. And I thought that would be a phenomenon to look at. And then I came across a caller in that research, a caller into James O'Brien's LBC show, who voted Boris in 2019, but was also, in his own words, gutted that he won. And he talked about not being able to vote for Corbyn because of no one being brought to justice, because he came from Birmingham, no one being brought to justice for the Birmingham pub bombings in the 1970s by the IRA.
See, I hadn't even realised that Corbyn was a Birmingham policeman in the 1970s.
Well,
I didn't know that was his purview.
He was a politician who was interested in negotiating peace. And that meant he would have to talk to the leaders of Sinn Féin and the IRA, and that was characterised by this particular caller and a lot of newspapers as he was a friend of the IRA, just as, in the same way, he's been called Friends of Hamas for advocating negotiations with Israel on behalf of Palestine interests. And therefore he's an anti-Semite, and therefore he was expelled from the Labour Party. But I thought the whole attitude towards Corbyn on the right and the left could be summed up with a rerun, which we had a couple of years ago, of David, Call Me Dave Cameron in 2016, responding to being heckled by Labour during Prime Minister's questions about what his mother would say, given Cameron's stance on the dismantling of the NHS.
This move towards more 7-day services, that's absolutely vital. Ask my mother. Oh, I think I know what my mother would say. I think she'd look across the dispatch box and she'd say, put on a proper suit, do up your tie, and sing the national anthem.
Mr. Speaker, if we're talking of motherly advice, my late mother would have said, stand up for the principle of a health service free at the point of use for everybody.
What that does is reveal that Cameron and the right wing just operates on a purely surface level. And it also lets slip that Cameron actually does believe that people who don't dress smartly as him and don't sing the national anthem are letting themselves and their country down. Whereas Corbyn says things like, stand up for some fucking principles, not, do your tie up, just get a 30-second laugh in the House of Commons to show that you're not a posh boy. And they are just poshos who think that if you're not as posh as me, then you're not worth thinking about. You're not deserving of access to free healthcare. And you can't be listened to as any kind of wise and principled human being if you don't do your tie up and don't sing the national anthem. And that's the basis of Farage's entire argument and Boris's entire argument as well.
We learn how not to argue. Scoring points in illogical ways, lying and fighting. The man in the lifts and the orange hair, sadistic and so cruel. A voice reaching out in a piercing cry, it stays with you until we're looking for them and you and I with those loud fallacies. Just those loud fallacies in the wire.
Ultravox there, of course, and Vienna.
So in the Fallacy in the Wild, we'd like to talk about the Fallacy of the Week from a non-political perspective. And our first example is from Britain's Got Talent. And this is Susan Boyle's appearance.
It's the archetypal, this is the fallacy
Sure,
made
yeah,
flesh.
because if you are unaware of Susan Boyle, she is a middle-aged Scottish housewife. She doesn't look like she's dressed up to be on TV. She hasn't had her hair done and her makeup done, and she's a little bit overweight. And so that's the impression when she first comes on stage to do her thing in front of the judges for the first time.
Hi, what's your name, darling?
My name is Susan Boyle.
And how old are you, Susan?
I am 47.
Okay, and who would you like to be as successful as?
Elaine Page.
Elaine
somebody
Page.
like that.
What are you going to sing tonight?
I'm going to sing I Dreamed a Dream from Les Miserables.
Okay. Big song.
Yeah? Yes.
I dreamed a dream in time gone by.
You didn't expect that, did you? Did you? No.
I dreamed that love would never die. I dreamed that God would be forgiving.
If you just heard it on audio, you kind of, the fact that she says, it's quite interesting that she said, how old are you? I'm 47. And the crowd laughs.
Yeah,
They just
they're
kinda go,
really, they're all expecting her to be shit. That's the thing. Every single, all of the judges, all of the entire audience, it cuts occasionally to the audience and they're kind of whispering to each other like, what the fuck's she doing? She's going to be rubbish. And it's entirely based on how she looks. And obviously that has absolutely nothing to do with how good your voice is. But it's such a strong effect that everyone who sees her kind of shuffle slightly awkwardly onto the stage thinks this person clearly can't be talented in any way because they don't look the part.
Yeah.
They don't look like a performer.
Yeah. And yet Simon Cowell has built an entire career on supposedly being talented enough to spot good talent despite looking the way that he does.
Yeah. Well, he hasn't always looked the way that he does. He's had
that's
quite a lot of
true.
work done.
Yes. And he doesn't look like he used to.
No.
Yes. And he doesn't. He thinks he does. He thinks he's getting back to his youth, but he looks better in this video from whenever it was, 2015 or something, than he does now. And I think the same fallacy as applied to whatever her name is, who became a judge on that, who used to be married to Les Dennis.
Oh.
The blonde woman.
Amanda someone?
Yes, Amanda Holden.
That's it, yeah.
She was sort of in sitcoms in Britain, a bit like Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Yeah.
They were in sitcoms in Britain, but because they look fabulous, they ended up going to Hollywood or becoming
there's absolutely
superstars and that
no
kind
end
stuff.
of people who have got massive careers simply because they looked good, with no other discernible talent whatsoever.
That's it. Yeah. But I think that there is an implication that because you're good looking, therefore you will know what you're talking about when it comes to
definitely.
judging other people's talent on their looks. But it's not there was a phenomena during the 70s in the punk era. Any punk musicians that could string a sentence together were the ones that ended up on the telly being asked about political stuff for youth. And they weren't necessarily so. Like Johnny Rotten was kind of the archetypal mouthpiece of disaffected youth, and then there's another guy called Jimmy Percy who was in a band called Sham 69, and he wrote songs. The lyrics were "Hurry up, Harry, come on, we're going down the pub." And you think, well, how did he earn this reputation as being somebody we ought to go and talk to? He ended up on like the equivalent of Newsnight. And things like that. And he was just an East End lout who happened to be in a band.
I will say, I was walking through the office today where we have TV on of the channels that are under our purview. One of them featured Cheryl Baker as a sofa guest on a daytime chat show.
Right.
Cheryl Baker was one of the members of Bucks Fizz.
Yeah.
What, 40 years ago?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Has she ever done anything else to suggest she has any talent or reason to be listened to? I mean, I'm sure she's a lovely person, but she sang like 4 songs that were quite popular in the 80s.
In the 80s?
And is still somehow a pundit who is someone that people ask about current news stories on daytime TV shows. It's weird. But there is this, that once you have some level of fame, if you're smart about it, you can parlay that into decades of career with no other abilities whatsoever. Because people see that and think, well, you're someone we should listen to.
Yeah, but I think there's a thing on the current Newsnight, late night political chat show. No, any questions? Any answers? Any questions? Or whatever that is. There's a TV show where you get politicians on to discuss the current political issues, and they enhance the panel of politicians with.
Do you mean Question Time? The flagship.
I do mean Question Time.
How can you?
Yeah, I do mean that.
It's been going for like 50 years.
Yeah. Well, and
the biggest political discussion show on British TV for the last 5 decades. You're like, any questions? What's it called?
But I've set up. Yeah, I can't remember it. Yeah, but that's because I've worked on many different versions.
It's after Prime Minister's Question Time
across the world that have got. It's the same. It's the same format, but they're all. I've worked on ones called Shonglap. And
I assumed you were talking about some obscure BBC Two late night political discussion program that I hadn't heard of. I didn't realise that you were talking about the biggest political show ever on British TV.
Yeah.
That you couldn't remember the name of.
Anyway, what they do on that show is they get somebody from the non-political perspective who is afforded some kind of credibility as the spokesman for ordinary human beings, but they are generally actors. They're kind of somewhat national
actor or
treasure
comedian
type
usually.
Actors. Yeah, and they get them on, and then they speak the truth to, frog-faced Farage. So I wonder whether in there somewhere is, the sense that, they make me laugh, they're quite sensible, they've got knowledge about this that I will look up to, which reminded me of the reason that Boris Johnson got voted into the office of London Mayor is because people thought he was funny on the comedy programme of I Got News for You. He was a guest presenter on that. He was also a guest star in even though he wasn't a star, a bloke what drove the car around the track on Top Gear. And so he did the whole bloody Trump thing that, who was it? No, I think it was Obama that said, yes, you could become the president by virtue of the fact that you've been on television, which is how Ronald Reagan got to be president, because everybody knew him. And Obama said,
yeah, name recognition is a
I've
big
not
thing.
been, I've not been on television. I'm not recognised. The people who are on television will have all of that exposure that I've got to work hard to create.
It's 100% what George W. Bush, the reason that he got elected president, is because people were like, George Bush, I remember that being a president. Yeah.
Yeah. That's presidential material, that name. Let's do that. Yeah. So I was trying to reach for, well, what is it about politicians that we grant them the gravitas of knowing what they're talking about sufficient to make policy that affects the way we live in our country? Where does that come from? Because famously, politics is like showbiz for ugly people. Where does their cachet come from so that we look at them, we look past the fact that they can't put a tie on or wear a suit properly, or past their poshos are only in it for themselves, such that we vote them in?
Most of the time it's because they're the lesser of the various evils.
Yes, the lesser
it's
of two
very
evils.
rare that one comes along that people are excited to vote for.
And when they are, the entire Labour Party works their way to get rid of them utterly. Mentioning no names.
They'll do
Jeremy Corbin.
Should be the slogan for most politicians.
Yeah, we are the Labour Party. Yeah, we'll do.
So our second example is from the sitcom Hot in Cleveland. Typical sitcom trope. She's got a brain tumour, goes to see the doctor, keep it light, nice, funny sitcom.
In your case, Melanie, I'd recommend a course of radiation to shrink the tumor and then assess the need for surgery. Let me grab your x-rays and we can discuss further. Oh, don't steal anything while I'm gone.
That is one handsome man.
Yeah, too handsome. I don't want a doctor that handsome. I need an ugly, nerdy doctor who had no dates in med school and had no choice but to focus on studying.
But he was funny.
No, he wasn't. He said a couple of lame jokes and we both giggled like schoolgirls because he's so handsome. Beautiful people get the benefit of the doubt all the time.
Oh, don't I know it?
I need an unattractive doctor.
Maybe you shouldn't base your entire decision on looks.
On your x-rays, they're right next to your y-rays.
Yeah, we gotta get out of here.
So this kind of subverts it in a way, because Mel basically is saying that attractive people get the benefit of the doubt all the time, which is largely true in many cases.
Yeah.
And she actively wants to choose an unattractive doctor, but she kind of also backs it up with a reason. I don't think it's a great reason, because unattractive people do date. So the idea that because he's attractive, he therefore couldn't have studied in med school because he would have been dating all the time, and that, it doesn't really hold up. But it's seeing a positive trait and thinking, well, there's negative things associated with that. And that is actually borne out by some research in terms of people looking at positive things and negative things together. There was research that where men and women, were shown pictures of people who had been rated attractive and unattractive and asked about their trustworthiness or their intelligence and things like that. Women typically rated attractive men as more intelligent and also more trustworthy and friendly and things like that. Men didn't typically rate attractive women as more intelligent.
Right.
The stereotype is that attractive and intelligent don't necessarily go together with women, but it does with men. The researchers theorized that might be partly because one of the things women find attractive about men is intelligence, and they find intelligent men attractive and therefore assume those kind of two things go together in the reverse as well, in a way. Yeah. So if you find someone attractive, you think they're more intelligent. Our final example is from a company that does user experience design and research.
In a recent usability test, we had a user who was looking at different websites comparing moving companies. On one website, he found a typo. He looked at that typo and he said, if they're this careless on their website, how can I trust them to move my furniture? Now, is that a fair judgment? Are those two related at all? Creating a typo and moving your furniture? Not really. There's not going to be the same people doing that. And yet, there it was. He now had a negative impression of the company because of one initial impression that was carelessness.
So this is a video from this UX design and research company that they are talking about the halo effect.
Yeah.
They describe this and say this is an example of the halo effect. I think it is, but I also think that there are some instances where it isn't fully fallacious to make some assumptions based on first impressions. And I think this is one of those kinds of examples, because when you are choosing from different companies based pretty much on just their websites, because you don't have friends who have used those companies before or anything else, when you're comparing companies who are, plumbers or carpet fitters or moving companies or whatever, the website is often all you have to go on. And I think it's reasonable to believe that a company that values attention to detail in their work will also value attention to detail in their website. They'll want to make a good impression.
Advertising space.
They'll value that.
Yeah.
So while it's absolutely not a one-to-one relationship, and yes, probably the people who made the website are different to the people who are actually doing the job, and the people who do the moving might be completely illiterate, and it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't make them worse movers.
Right.
But you only have a very limited number of things to go on. And the other related example to this, real life wise, is that my youngest is currently looking at universities and went to a university fair recently where lots of different universities had tables and had kind of representatives from the uni talking to prospective students and basically trying to encourage them to go to that university. And she visited one stall, was asking questions about the course she wants to do, and the person was basically just rubbish.
Right.
Like, she didn't expect the person to know specific things about their course, her course that she wants to do, because it's a specialised thing. But they didn't know things about the university that you would expect them to know. They didn't seem particularly interested. Basically, she asked them one thing that you would kind of expect them to know, and they just started Googling it on their phone, in front of them. She was like, I can Google it.
Yeah. I want you to have absorbed that and sell it to me.
And the thing is, that individual wasn't good at their job. They weren't a good representative for the university. Doesn't mean the course is bad or that the university is bad.
Yeah.
But she was absolutely put off going to that university by that person.
Yeah.
And again, it's not a one-to-one relationship, but I do think it's valid, because if a university is great, then a person who goes to that university and represents them at a university fair would want to sell that university. If that person has had a really good experience and really enjoys and appreciates the university they go to, they would want to do a good job. This person clearly didn't give a shit. So they aren't representing someone who enjoys or values that university. So that does, I think, tell you something about the university in that way. Even though it's a very superficial first impression, there is a judgment you can make. It doesn't tell you the whole story, and it may mean that you miss out on a wider thing, but you don't have an opportunity to visit all the universities. So you have to make judgments based on smaller things, a smaller set of data.
I guess the same thing applies to reading the reviews of a product when you're buying it online. It's that same kind of thing, isn't it? That you would go through the reviews, and in order to get a real life experience of this product that's glossily advertised on Temu or Amazon, you want somebody who has photographed the real thing and is talking about it in real everyday use. So similarly, you want somebody who has lived the university experience to talk about it in real terms. And if they don't do that, then they're not selling their experience.
You also have to ask why, and a plausible reason is that they're not enthusiastic about the university.
Yes, exactly.
It is entirely possible that they were just a bad choice to be doing this.
Yeah.
But when you are looking at multiple different places in one day and going, there's a hall and everyone's got a table, and there are people who are like, I really love my university. I can tell you all about it. And I've specifically done research because I wanted to do a good job because I like the place I'm at and I want you to go there and like it too kind of situation. That's obviously going to give you a much better impression. So
it's also a bit like that phenomena of, go back to the kind of spelling error thing on the website. It's a bit like having recruited people to posts in the past that you get CVs in,
yes,
loads of them in job applications. And actually, one of the first filters that comes into play, in discussing, right, how do we go about this with talking to HR? So, okay, how do we manage 450 applications for one role?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, one of the things, does the job require kind of accuracy? Well, yeah, and and presentations. Well, so you just filter out all the ones that have got spelling mistakes.
Absolutely, yeah. If they've misspelled attention to detail, then they don't get an interview.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yes.
So we're gonna play fake news, folks. I love the game. It's a great game. I understand the game as well as anybody.
Yes, it's time for Fake News, the game where I read out 3 Trump quotes, 2 of which are real and 1 I made up, and Mark has to figure out which one is fake news.
Because I won this once, don't know whether you remember, I won this once, and I looked particularly great at the time that I won that, so I should naturally be granted all of the wins from here on out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I remember that time you won.
Yeah.
You looked particularly radiant.
Yes, that was the word I was grasping for, and obviously, as a result of that, I was.
Therefore, you must be great at this game.
Seemed to be the winner. Yes, yeah.
So these are all from one response that he gave to a question,
right?
Which was about the auto pen. You remember the thing where Republicans started talking about how various of Biden's executive orders weren't valid and, in fact, could just be ignored completely because he apparently had used an auto pen to sign them. He hadn't physically signed them. It was a thing for a couple of weeks.
With a Sharpie.
In between wars in the Middle East.
Right.
And a reporter asked him, have you uncovered any evidence? Anything specific was signed without President Biden's knowledge? Because that was the claim, was that Biden didn't know what was going on. He didn't know what was being signed.
Yeah, they were just
executive orders were being signed in his name, and it was all a big scandal. Statement number 1: no, but I've uncovered, the human mind. I was in a debate with the human mind, and I didn't think he knew what the hell he was doing. So it's just one of those things, one of those problems. We can't ever allow that to happen to our country. The danger our country was in. And I know some of the people that worked with him. Radical left, horrible people.
Wow! I was in a debate with the human mind. Wow! That's like Blair saying, yeah, I had a word with God. And he said, yeah, it's fine. So, what the hell?
Statement number 2.
Okay.
They did things and signed things nobody would even believe. And he didn't know anything about it. I don't believe there's no way he knew anything about it. The kinds of radical left just crazy people that hate America. And I could give you some names of some of the people because I ask questions, so I know who they are. It's really a disgrace is what it is.
Yeah, I know who they are. Yeah.
And statement number 3. There are a lot of people that were here when that happened, and they're here right now. And they'll answer your question very accurately. But I know some of the people that use that auto pen, and those are not the people that had the same ideology as Joe Biden. These were radical left lunatics that used that, and they didn't get elected. He didn't get elected either, actually.
Okay. Right. So we've got radical left in there to add some semblance of truth to the made-up one. And the human mind one is so good. Horrible people. Okay, so there's the number 3 is that usual tell of it, possibly a tell of it being the most normal of them. I want to say that and realise how ridiculous that is. So they sign things nobody would even believe, but that's a very Trump phrase. Radical left, just crazy people that hate America. I could give you some of the names of some of the people because I asked questions, so I know who they are. Oh no. Okay. Eek. I think that number 3 is the one that you made up.
Okay, so of the other two, which are you more convinced by?
I think I'm more convinced by number 2.
Okay.
Did things and signed things nobody would even believe.
And number 2 is fake news.
Oh, good work. Oh, no, you see, it was that convoluted. I don't believe there's no way he knew anything about it.
Yeah, I convinced you.
And and they give you some of the some of the names of some of the people because I asked questions so I know was crazy enough for him to have said it. We just go, all right, yeah. Just go, oh no! Oh my God! That means the others are definitely true.
That does mean
no.
For example,
number
1
the human mind
is true. No. Well, it's not true. It's a real thing he said.
It was said.
No, but I've uncovered, the human mind. I was in a debate with the human mind. And I didn't think he knew what the hell he was doing. So, it's just one of those things, one of those problems. We can't ever allow that to happen to our country. The danger our country was in. And I know some of the people that worked with him, radical left, horrible people.
It just escalates so quickly as well, doesn't it? And I was in a debate with the human mind and nobody thought to intervene at that moment and just say,
What?
What did you just say?
He hasn't uncovered evidence, but he has uncovered the human mind.
I've uncovered the human mind. I was in a debate with the human. He's in a debate with his mind constantly because there's one going, "Oh yeah, we should do this. Oh, should we? No, yeah, the people love me. No, they don't. Yes, they do. No. Yeah. Oh, what the fuck?"
He also said number 3.
There are a lot of people that were here when that happened, and they're here right now, and they'll answer your question very accurately. But I know some of the people that use that auto pen, and those are not the people that had the same ideology as Joe Biden. These were radical left lunatics that used that, and they didn't get elected. He didn't get elected either, actually.
You see, that's got all the hallmarks of being made up, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But he didn't get elected, actually. Yeah.
If there were people who didn't have the same ideology as Joe Biden, who he has been calling a communist.
Yeah.
But these were radical left lunatics. They didn't have the same ideology as Joe Biden. Why are they still here at the White House now?
Yeah. Yes.
Because he said they were here then and they're here now. And they'll answer your question. The question was, have you uncovered any evidence that anything specific was signed?
Yeah.
They will, if they're prepared to answer that question, then why doesn't Trump have the answer? Because he says no, he hasn't uncovered anything. He's just uncovered the human mind.
Yes. I'm too busy debating with the human mind to have any knowledge about this question that you're asking. And far be it from me to just say, I don't know. There is none. There is no evidence. It's something we made up just to slight Joe Biden. It's completely groundless. I'm sorry I've even troubled you. But no, I was in a debate with the human mind. And as a result of the debate, I didn't think he knew what the hell he was doing. I don't know what the hell he's doing. Debating with the human mind. What the hell? It's like Matt Hancock's diversity of thought.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Oh. So we've got a few social contestants.
Yeah. I hope they've been driven mad just as much as I have.
On Facebook, Jonas says, I guess number 1, but that's a total shot in the dark.
Right.
Jeremy says, I think it's 3. I think I've heard 1 before or something similar. Clever if you altered a real quote. And 2 is all-out assault on the opposition, so it feels like him. 3 sort of removes Biden from the radical left. I think he would flip that, making Biden the extreme and the puppeteers less radical, but still America haters. So, yeah.
Wow. That's,
they were more radical than Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Andrew says, I'll go with number 2 simply because no one else has guessed it yet. And Fennec says, my guess isn't number 3 is fake news. Number 1 is too mad and depraved to be anything but real. The line of debate with the human mind is just surreal.
It's so
Number
good.
2 seems real because he says one thing and then contradicts himself in the next sentence.
Right.
On Patreon, One-Eyed Nick says, Jim, do you burn the toast to get yourself in the right mindset for this human waste bin talking? I kind of want to hear Pol Potluck talking about his debate with the human mind.
Nice.
And I think I remember something similar to 3, so I'm going to say number 2 is fake news, but I let the auto pen write this answer for me, so if I'm wrong, it wasn't me.
Good work. Good work. Yeah.
Renee Z says, "Oh dear, I don't remember anyone asking him if he uncovered anything. I just remember him saying that using the auto pen was disrespectful. Disgrace is a bit like disrespect, so I think 2 is real, or it was written by Nick's auto pen. 1 is real, because as soon as he answered no, he backpedaled. I'll choose 3 as fake news."
Yep.
Richard Thunder Hopkins says, "None of them make sense naturally, so all are likely true." Well played, Jim. I'm going with 1 as fake, though. I'm just thinking that debating the human mind is a tad too far for even the most cognitively arrested person on the planet.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Scott says, number 1 is probably real. There's no way Donald could articulate whatever his fevered brain thinks happened to this country, and it has the obligatory double negatives. Number 3 must be real, with 7 that's and the fake election drivel. Number 2 has lots of Trumpy things, but I say it's just Jim getting too adept at this Donald speak. I need a drink. And Anders finally says, "Damn, that caught me off guard. I'm going to go for the one with the radical left in it as the one that you made up." And then leaves a space for the correct answer to be filled in by me.
Nice. Very good. Well, in a way, I don't mind losing to the debate with the human mind.
And it's time for the part of the show that this week, at least, is called No New Wars is Not a Logical Fallacy, because it's all been a bit bomby of late.
Yeah,
it's not great.
With new wars.
Yeah, because he did promise coming in, like campaigning, that it would be not war-y, his presidency. In fact, he was saying that Kamala would have wars, and if you voted for him, you wouldn't. But, I mean, he said a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
None of those were true either.
Price of eggs. Yeah. The thing is, well, it's a bit like when George Bush said mission accomplished and you think the person you want in charge of this kind of stuff is not someone who lies the same way that we breathe. So the fact he would go in and go, yeah, we bombed the fuck out of everything, and then say we bombed the fuck out of everything, and he hasn't.
I mean, they did bomb the fuck out of quite a lot of stuff, but no, obviously he hasn't achieved. It's way too early to tell how much they've achieved, but from early indications, they haven't achieved the things he claimed. But he had his mission accomplished moment this morning when he claimed he'd negotiated a ceasefire, and then lots of other bombs happened. But the thing is, there's been stuff. Obviously, there's been stuff going on between Israel and Iran for a while. They've been going at it for some time now. Yeah. But most specifically for the last 12 days, there's been exchanges of missiles and rockets and things like that. And depending on who you ask in the Trump administration, they were either supporting, involved, providing weapons, or had nothing to do with it.
Right. Yeah.
And no one could pin anything down. There was a discussion between Tucker and Ted Cruz that went a bit viral because Tucker was asking him about what was going on, and Ted Cruz claimed, essentially, he said we were bombing Iran.
Right.
Like the day after, or the same day as the spokesperson for the White House had said we're not involved.
Right.
And he kind of backpedaled and he said, well, by we, I mean basically Israel, but we're supporting them.
Right.
Like we've sanctioned it, or other people said that we've got nothing to do with it, and we weren't even informed. And then Trump said, yes, I gave them the green light. And it's just, it was a total shit show for several days of no one really knowing what was going on or who.
And everybody wanted, and Trump wanted to claim it because he has got to be in charge of everything, and he's got to be seen to be a strong leader. So he was, even though it was an unprecedented attack from, well, not unprecedented, but, it's Israel
quite precedented.
Oh yeah, we'll just fucking have a go at this lot in order, not least to distract everyone from Gaza. With the justification is because Trump had ended the deal that Obama had put in place, which meant that people could go in and inspect these sites. We now know that they are. This is Israel saying.
Yeah, I mean,
Trump
I think
was kind of going, I want to have been in charge of that. So
yeah, this is the thing,
because
people have been talking. The media's been talking about the fact that Netanyahu's been claiming that Iran were weeks away from having a nuclear weapon for the last 30 years. He constantly talks about it.
Yeah,
and obviously they haven't been. And I think not very many media outlets are pointing out that they wouldn't be where they are, Iran, if Trump hadn't pulled out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that Obama negotiated in 2015, which stopped them from enriching uranium. Because prior to 2015, Iran had 10,000 kilograms of low-enriched uranium, 3.67% enriched. When you mine uranium ore, it's about like 0.7% uranium. And so you have to go through various processes to enrich it, to get more uranium, and 3.67% is the limit that they were set by the GCPOA in 2015. But it's also basically that's plenty to use for nuclear power and most non-weapon based amounts of uranium. So, but they had a large stockpile, 10,000 kilograms of low enriched uranium at that point. When the GCPOA came in 2015, part of that was to drop that by 97%. So their stockpile dropped to 300 kilograms of 3.67% enriched uranium. And they weren't allowed to enrich it any higher, and they weren't allowed to have more than 300 kilograms.
Yeah.
And that was going to be the case for 15 years from 2015. So that would still be the situation if Trump had just left that in place.
Yeah.
But of course, because it was a thing that Obama did, he got rid of it.
Had to get rid of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so he got rid of it in 2018. And of course, they started enriching their uranium because then they were getting sanctioned. There was nothing else to stop them doing it. So they started enriching it. They started stockpiling more. And they have gradually, over the course of that time, got it to now they have 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, which is much more than you need for energy purposes, nuclear power. It's not as much as you need for weapons, but it's because you need like 90% for weapons. But once you've done 60%, it doesn't take as long to get that stockpile up to 90%. Yeah. But equally, there's a lot of other logistics that they don't necessarily have in place, like the ability to put that into ballistic missiles and all kinds of other things. So the US intelligence services basically don't think that they are building nuclear weapons at the moment. The fact that they potentially could has been a factor ever since 2018. But there's no intelligence to suggest that they actually are. They've said they're doing it for research. There's not really reasons to have that enriched uranium other than weaponry. And basically they're researching into weaponry, it seems like what they're doing. But that doesn't mean they're kind of getting ready to use weapons against anyone or actually close to having the kinds of weapons that they could use against other people. The US intelligence community says they're not doing that. Trump doesn't care. Netanyahu says they are, but he's been saying they are all the time. Caroline Leavitt said when she was asked after the strikes, do you have any actual evidence that they were preparing a nuclear weapon or getting close to preparing a nuclear weapon? And she said, it's just facts. They've never been closer to a nuclear weapon. Which isn't the same thing. I've never been closer to dating Florence Pugh. It doesn't mean I'm close. I've never been closer than I am right now.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not a thing that has previously been more likely to happen. And that's true in Iran. There hasn't been a time in their history when they have been closer to having nuclear weapons, but it doesn't mean they're on the brink of having nuclear weapons. And Trump basically is just easily led. He listened to Netanyahu telling him that they almost have it and that would be a disaster. And then he went and talked to Steve Bannon, who said, we mustn't attack Iran. That would be a bad thing. And that's when he came out and said, I'll give my decision in 2 weeks. within the next 2 weeks. And then he listened to someone else in the White House who said, oh, yeah, we should do it. Possibly Lindsey Graham, who's quite a hawk on this. Possibly Ted Cruz, people like that. And at that point was like, yeah, we should definitely do it because we can't let them get nuclear weapons. And literally he said, I don't care what Tulsi Gabbard says, who's the director of National Intelligence, saying they're not doing it. They're not in that position.
I suspect that the people that were the hawks know exactly how to play Trump. So they just said, look, this will make you look like a strong leader.
Yeah.
This will make up for your fucking awful parade that everyone's laughing at you because of. They're calling you taco. This is the thing you could show that you don't chicken out. So, and he would just be so easily played.
Yeah, I mean, basically you just have to say they're calling you yellow. And he would be, well, I'm going to do something else.
Exactly, yeah. Nobody calls it yellow.
Yeah.
That's it, yeah.
The thing is, there's an upsetting number of Republicans who, because they're evangelical Christians, are actively looking forward to Armageddon in the Middle East because it fulfills prophecies that mean that they get to go to heaven. And that's fucking scary that those people are in positions of power and advising him on stuff, which is, I think, part of this.
Yeah. It's exactly the same as the people that were of the same opinion vis-a-vis 9/11.
Yeah.
They would all end up with 27 virgins on the left hand of Allah. Yeah, it's exactly the same thing.
There's a lot of people in that group for whom peace in the Middle East would be very disappointing. And the other thing is that if this was a real thing, first of all, you go through Congress. There was absolutely no evidence whatsoever that this was an imminent threat. And so there was plenty of time to get the advice and consent of Congress, which is required by the Constitution before starting a war or doing anything warlike. Yeah. And he didn't do that based on imminent threat to American personnel, which there's no evidence of. But also, because he was talking about it for days, he did the exact thing that he was complaining about Obama and Mosul. When he was saying that they kept saying, "Oh, we're going to go into Mosul, we're going to get we're going to protect the people in Mosul and stuff like that," and that gave the terrorists an opportunity to leave. And he was talking about bombing Iran for days. Yeah. And the intelligence now suggests that they moved any stockpile of uranium stuff that they had at those places that have then since been bombed. And now, whereas the US knew where that stuff was, that they knew like how many kilograms, how enriched it was, and now they don't know where it is. It certainly doesn't seem like his claims of total obliteration and wiping out the Iranian nuclear program are valid.
Well, of course, and that's why it's dangerous having an inveterate liar who's really has a fragile ego, who wants to be seen to have brought about the total destruction of, or the total ceasefire of, and he will just try and will things into being.
He
by
basically
just
declared ceasefire in the same way that Michael Scott declared bankruptcy.
Right.
He dropped 14 3,000-pound bombs, the enormous MOPs, on various 4 sites in Iran, and then said, "Now there must be peace." Basically.
Yeah.
Which is like a bully just punching you in the face and saying, "Look, we don't need to fight."
Yes, that's right. Don't come round here. Don't think about coming back and hitting me.
There must be no retaliation. Yeah. And announced this morning UK time that there was a ceasefire that Iran and Israel had both agreed to, and Iran went, "No, we haven't."
No, we haven't. Yeah.
And,
hello.
And
yeah.
Weirdly, in the announcement, it was something like basically that Iran was gonna ceasefire first for 12 hours, and then Israel would do it after that.
Yeah,
and that's not how that works.
No, it's a bit like
you stop shooting first. We'll sure. We will fire multiple more missiles and bombs and things at you, but you're not allowed to do anything for 12 hours. We'll just
like that.
It's like
that
free slaps in the
That gag about the when Sweden decided to switch from driving on the left to driving on the right, but what they did, they phased it in, so only the lorries started driving on the right for the first day. Yeah, and there was a lot less traffic on the second day.
So during the ceasefire period that Trump declared, Israel claimed that Iran had fired missiles at them and then just bombed them a lot.
Yeah.
And so obviously Iran responded to that. And then this afternoon UK time, he basically exasperatedly talked to reporters on the White House lawn and saying, I'm really annoyed at both of them, basically. I'm not happy with Iran. I'm not happy with Israel. He said they've been fighting so long that neither of them know what the fuck they're doing.
Wow.
Which is, I mean, really unusual for a president, possibly unprecedented. It's not unprecedented for him to swear on camera while being president.
Yeah.
But directly to reporters, when being asked questions. People have said that it's because he was just so frustrated. It seemed to me more evidence of cognitive decline. That his filters of what is appropriate are going or gone. To the extent even he understands the level of appropriate. You know, he swears and reportedly uses M-words off camera, but he up to now he's been able to avoid doing that when speaking to reporters. But as president on the White House lawn talking to a gaggle of reporters, that's really, really unusual.
It was quite interesting though, because it was the response about whether Iran meant what they sent, whether they even onto American soil, because that was a bit like Biden's response was when Iran. He said, "Well, Iran had to respond."
I mean, because they fired missiles at the U.S. airbase in Qatar, didn't they?
Yeah,
that was essentially their retaliation before the ceasefire was announced.
Yeah,
and again, they apparently gave enough warning that meant that no one was hurt, and it was like it was seen as a bit of a token, like we've got to do something, but we don't want to accelerate stuff, so we'll keep it.
And he
small.
actually said Israel said they fired on us, and then Trump said, "Well, maybe it was fired by accident."
I mean, I don't know.
It didn't even land.
I don't know that there's evidence that they did fire a thing, let alone by accident.
No.
But it may be. It's an evolving situation.
And it's interesting that Trump is kind of complaining that Netanyahu and Israel are doing what they love doing so much. They've been doing that to Gaza, and he hasn't worried about that because he wants, he's going to do Trump Gaza. So,
well, it's because he believes whatever dictators tell him.
Yeah.
He's been repeatedly shocked to find out that Putin doesn't actually want to stop the war.
Yeah.
So,
That Putin turns out to be a bad guy. Yeah.
Yeah. The fact that he spent a day with having Netanyahu tell him things that aren't true. Yes, of course he has. He says whatever he can get away with and then continues the bombing.
Yeah. And then Trump tries to pull rank and kind of shouts in caps on Truth Social, "You should stop this." Signed
as if
the
he
President of the United
any
States.
Control over the situation at all.
Yes. Yeah. Because Netanyahu knows that whatever Israel does, America will support. So it's quite unusual that Trump is saying, when I call a ceasefire, you don't go and bomb the fuck out of everybody. You drop all you've got on them. But he thinks that he's a bit like Canute in this way, isn't he? He's just standing there going, "No, go back, stop." And you're up against Netanyahu, who is a proper despotic dictator. Not like you, Trump, who's a pretend wannabe, doesn't quite understand what it is to be a despotic dictator. But he's basically a New York real estate shyster. That's it. That's as
he's got
far
all
as
of the
he's
letters in Canute, just not necessarily in the same order.
Yeah. Yes.
At the moment, at least, as of we're talking currently about 1:30 in the morning, UK time, Wednesday morning,
25th. Yeah,
there is currently a ceasefire which appears to be holding. It has been for a few hours now. They are both honouring it. It very, very much remains to be seen to what extent that keeps going, and doing what he did not lead to this ceasefire. No. He
will
very much had the potential to inflame the situation massively. Yeah. What it also very likely has done is given the Iranians more reason than ever to actually now build nuclear weapons, because you don't fucking see this kind of thing happening with North Korea, do you?
Right.
Because they have nuclear weapons.
Yes.
You don't see the US attacking actual nuclear powers. So if they have indeed moved all of those 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium away from those bombing sites because of all the days of Trump talking about it, and probably the advanced centrifuges that are required to do that further 30% of your enrichment, this is very much a reason to put yourself in that position where you're not going to get attacked in the future.
Yeah. And finally, some things we really don't have time to talk about.
Trump finally got the big military parade he's been craving since his first term. He couldn't have it then because he'd accidentally hired some people who weren't craven sycophants, and James Mattis, his Secretary of Defense at the time, politely refused to arrange one. Actually, he said he'd rather swallow acid. This time around, though, Trump has exclusively hired the most obsequious brown-nosers he could find. So when he asked for tanks to trundle through DC, they just asked him, "How many, sir?" with tears in their eyes. Incidentally, I'm pretty sure Trump is so frequently approached by people with tears in their eyes because of the horrendous toxic stench he very obviously gives off. The safe distance from Trump without a gas mask must be at least 100 feet. But I digress. Trump no doubt expected his military birthday parade would be an intimidating show of might befitting the kind of TV dictator he so longs to be, but the outcome was a bit more pathetic. There were people there, and some footage from later in the day shows what could even be described as crowds, but it couldn't be clearer from the almost empty bleachers on the actual parade route that they expected a way bigger turnout than they got. Footage of tanks squeaking past bored, sparse and silent spectators were only matched in patheticness by the footage of trained soldiers very deliberately not marching, but ambling past the yawning Secretary of State and dozing President. By contrast, on the same day, over 5 million people, including some of our loveliest listeners, took part in over 2,000 No Kings protests in large and small towns across America, in one of the largest single-day protests in American history. Obviously, White House spokesman Stephen Chung called the No Kings protests a complete and utter failure with minuscule attendance, while claiming 250,000 people attended the parade, which, depending on who you ask, is about 3 to 6 times more than were actually there. We shouldn't assume that will translate in any way to midterm votes, and all the fighting like hell still needs to happen, but we can be pretty sure that the day Trump was looking forward to for almost a decade made him sad, and sometimes that's enough.
In the same way that Trump alleges he fixed free speech by inventing Truth Social until Musk bought Twitter and did the same, well, they both didn't, by the way. Donald Trump Jr. launched a new cell phone product called Trump Mobile in order to fix the mobile phone industry, alleging that its upcoming T1 smartphone will be proudly designed and built in the United States. Todd Weaver, CEO of Purism, one of the only known companies to actually manufacture a cell phone in the United States, kind of doubts it. Unless the Trump family secretly built out a secure onshore or nearshore fabrication operation over years of work without anyone noticing, it's simply not possible to deliver what they're promising. Based on the specs of the T1 listed by Trump Mobile, Weaver told CNN he believes the T1 phone looks like a version of the already available Revi 7 Pro 5G, made by China-based Wingtech, which provides manufacturing services for smartphones and other products. The phone retails for around $169 on Amazon. Max Weinbach, analyst at Creative Strategies, added, there are only realistically 4 or 5 smartphone original device manufacturers that would actually be able to manufacture something like this, and all of them are based out of China. The Revel device has the same screen size, battery capacity and storage as the T1 phone, and both phones have a headphone jack, a rare find on modern smartphones, a nice old-fashioned feature Trump would no doubt love, though I expect he want a 1/4-inch jack like a proper headphone socket, though I also suspect he's suspicious of stereo. Worldwide device tracker expert Ryan Reith added, any phone that's going to be sold in September or shipped in September to the US, the majority of it is not going to be manufactured in the US. That's a given. And indeed, in a press release, the Trump Organization said Trump Mobile's products are not designed, developed, manufactured, distributed or sold by the Trump Organization or any of their respective affiliates or principals. Yeah, way to fix the tariff problems too, eh, Donny?
A couple of weeks ago, amateur whale carver RFK Jr. fired all 17 members of the Advisory Committee on Immunisation Practices, a panel of experts which advises the CDC how and when people should get vaccines. His reasoning was that the members of the committee all had conflicts of interest, which is an anti-vax way of saying they knew true facts about vaccines because they'd done actual vaccine-related science. As is typically the case, scientists who do actual vaccine research end up interacting with companies that make vaccines, and they're required to literally disclose these relationships at the start of every public meeting of the committee. He promised not to pick ideological anti-vaxxers as replacements, but then he also claimed he didn't hit that bear with his car before he dumped it in Central Park, and that was a lie too. Among the new committee members he announced were Retzef Levi, an MIT management professor who called for the COVID vaccines to be withdrawn from the market, Vicky Pebworth, a nurse who is on the board of the National Vaccine Information Centre, a deliberately misnamed anti-vax misinformation group, and Dr. Robert Malone, who we talked about on a Patreon episode when he was interviewed by Dinesh D'Souza.
Oh, yeah.
Malone worked on very early mRNA vaccine technology, and when real scientists refused to give him the credit for all of the vaccine science that's been done since then, he became bitter and found a welcoming audience in the right-wingosphere by spreading dangerous misinformation about the COVID shots. That's not even all of them, but I'm already too depressed.
Republican lawmaker with ectopic pregnancy nearly died amid new Florida abortion laws, but blames the left. So runs the headline in the Independent newspaper. And all you need to know is right there. Florida Republican Kat Cammack recounts emergency room ordeal but claims fear-mongering by Democrats and pro-choice activists sowing confusion amongst medical professionals. A doctor discovered the embryo implanted where the fallopian tube meets the uterus, a cornual ectopic pregnancy, and frankly told the representative, if this ruptures, it will kill you. But after deciding against surgery, the facility doctors and nurses had to be persuaded to give her the shot of methotrexate she required to expel the pregnancy. That was because the state's 6-week ban had come into effect at the start of that month, causing staff to fear they could lose their medical licenses and be sent to jail if they gave her the drug, which blocks the flow of folic acid to the embryo to prevent its growth. Cammack was only 5 weeks pregnant at the time, and the embryo had no heartbeat, and her own safety was in jeopardy. But nevertheless, the congresswoman found herself forced to pull up the letter of the law on her phone to argue the case, and even put in a call to Governor Ron DeSantis without being able to reach him before staff relented and came to her aid. But surprisingly, given her ordeal, the representative does not feel the law itself is at fault, and instead blames Democrats for scaring medical professionals into confusion over their responsibilities. It was absolute fear-mongering at its worst. There will be some comments like, well, thank God we have abortion services, even though what I went through wasn't an abortion, she said. Molly Duane, a senior attorney at the Centre for Reproductive Rights, took issue with Cammack's argument that pro-choice activists were to blame for sowing confusion, pointing out that Florida's regulators had made it clear they intended to aggressively enforce their 6-week ban, whilst also failing to define ectopic pregnancy within the legislation. There's a line in an Outburst song that runs, and nothing gets done till somebody dies. Well, if it takes one of their own to perish for right-wingers to change their minds, let's keep hoping. Frankly, I'm surprised she didn't blame Biden, or Hillary, or Obama.
The US military has a long-standing policy of staying out of partisan politics. When Biden gave a speech in 2022 warning about the rise of fascism, he was criticised purely for having 2 Marines standing nearby in camera shot. Trump's assistant VA Secretary James Hutton accused Biden of using the Marines as props, and Republican Congressman Darrell Issa said the only thing worse than Biden's speech trashing his fellow citizens is wrapping himself in our flag and Marines to do it. Neither seemed too bothered when Trump signed his Muslim travel ban in the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, or when he appeared with Marines in a video shot at the White House by the Republican National Committee. Anyway, earlier this month, in the run-up to his parade, Trump gave a speech to the troops at Fort Bragg, filled with all his usual divisive rhetoric, and the assembled soldiers laughed at his jokes, cheered his attacks on Democrats, and enthusiastically booed their fellow Americans and the media at his encouragement. Meanwhile, a Trump-themed pop-up shop on the base sold Make America Great Again hats, shirts and necklaces and other pro-Trumpabilia, including a pretend credit card labelled White Privilege Card Trumps Everything. Holy fuck, what's going on with the military, you may well ask, and that's fair, but it may not be quite as bad as it seems. The soldiers in the crowd and on camera behind Trump weren't a representative cross-section of the troops at the base, but rather ones who had been handpicked based on both their political leanings and even appearance. The group visible on camera was almost exclusively white and male, which may in part be due to those with views opposing Trump being actively encouraged not to attend. But military.com also obtained messages specifically restricting certain groups. One such message simply said, "No fat soldiers."
Yeah, it's all about the halo effect. Yeah. Got to get the good-looking ones in. Yep. Federal U.S. District Judge William Young in Massachusetts ruled on Monday it was illegal for the Trump administration to cancel several hundred research grants, adding that the cuts raised serious questions about racial discrimination. Judge Young said the administration's process was arbitrary and capricious, and that it did not follow long-held government rules and standards when it abruptly cancelled grants deemed to focus on gender identity or diversity, equity and inclusion. Young, an appointee of Republican President Ronald Reagan, went on to address what he called a darker aspect of the cases, calling it palpably clear that what was behind the government actions was racial discrimination and discrimination against America's LGBTQ community. After 40 years on the bench, I've never seen government racial discrimination like this, he added. He ended Monday's hearing saying, "Have we no shame?" Despite the ruling that they had done just the opposite, Andrew Nixon, a spokesman for NIH's parent agency, the Department of Health and Human Services, said the Trump administration is exploring all legal options, including asking the judge to stay the ruling or appealing. HHS stands by its decision to end funding for research that prioritised ideological agendas over scientific rigour and meaningful outcomes for the American people, he said. While the original lawsuits didn't specifically claim racial discrimination, they said the new NIH policies prohibited research into certain politically disfavoured subjects, including cardiovascular health, sexually transmitted infections, depression, Alzheimer's and alcohol abuse in minors, among other things. Attorneys cited projects such as one tracking how medicines may work differently in people of ancestrally diverse backgrounds, and said the cuts affected more than scientists, such as potential harm to patients in a closed study of suicide treatment. So, unless you have a politically favourable detrimental condition that is supported by the Trump administration, or I don't know, something like being rich and white and sick in the head, let's hope the impetus of finding stuff they're doing becomes a tsunami.
Having gutted the board of the Kennedy Center and installed his own team of culture vacuums in their place, Trump finally went to see a show there this month and picked the most ironic possible one, Les Miserables. A deliciously cruel reporter asked him a pointed question on the red carpet. Have you seen the musical before, and do you identify more with Jean Valjean or Javert? Trump, of course, claimed to have seen it a number of times. Well, 0 is a number. But he was unable to decide who he felt more of a kinship with. The fundamentally heroic man whose momentary act of desperation in his youth caused him to spend the rest of his life seeking redemption, or the irrational bureaucrat with no empathy whose obsession with law, order and punishment took over his life. Yes, a tricky one. Several cast members refused to perform for him and were replaced by understudies, while the audience responded to his presence with a mix of cheers and boos. When one group of ticket holders found out he would be attending, they donated their tickets to a group of drag performers who showed up in full regalia and protested in the auditorium.
Fantastic. Being disengaged from British politics for a few days, relishing musicians playing music in the sunshine of the Isle of Wight Festival does give one a sense of relief and perspective, which of course comes crashing down, like Justin Timberlake's artistic reputation perhaps, when it turns out that Starmer has been doing his utmost to perpetuate the diminished stature of Britain on the world stage by insisting on adhering to the so-called special relationship with the US, which means A, he gets to say, oh, I'm sure Donald isn't going to bother wading in on Iran, he's far too sensible to escalate things, and B, agreeing with the nature of the need to bomb the fuck out of Iran when he does, and maintain the old Israel has the right to defend itself bullshit like a lapdog arse-licking poodle waiting for scraps that never come. Plus, what are Israel defending themselves against? A possible future crime? Surely that's just declaring war? Just like Blair forever besmirched himself with the dodgy dossier, weapons of mass destruction lies perpetuated by Bush, so Starmer is likely to see himself tarred with yet more Trump narcissism. What with that and the seeming refusal to see the impact of the number of resignations of Labour councillors and MPs that the cutting of the personal independent payments welfare bill to pay for the increase in defence spending is generating, Starmer could be in the middle of utterly blowing it all for Labour. And this week, various defence advisers have warned the UK to be prepared to start living on a war footing. With all the shit you're doing to the country, what exactly would we be going to war to defend? Unless, of course, it's Supergrass continuing to be able to tour the 30th anniversary performance of their first album, reminding us that we are young, we run green, keep our teeth nice and clean, see our friends, see the sights, and feel all right.
So that's all the bad arguments and faulty reasoning we have time for this week. You'll find the show notes at fallacioustrump.com, and if you hear Trump say something stupid or want to ask if it's a fallacy, our contact details are on the contact page.
If you think we've used a fallacy ourselves, let us know. And if you've had a good time, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, or simply tell one other person in person about how much they'd like our podcast. And you can support the show at patreon.com/ftrump. Just like our strawman level patrons Chuck Gray, Mike Smith, LT, Colleen Laila, Richard Thunder Hopkins, Will M, Scott, Mark Reike, and Amber R. Buchanan, who told us when we met her at QED we could just call her Amber. And last year at QED I met the listener who recognised her at QED the year before because we keep using her full name all the time. And our true Scotsman level patrons Renee Z, Melissa Sytek, Stephen Bickle, Janet Uetta, Andrew Houck, and our top patron Kaz Tui. Thank you so much for your continued patronage. It's very, very much appreciated. Thank you.
You can connect with those awesome people as well as us and other listeners in the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/fallacioustrump or in the Discord at fallacioustrump.com/discord.
All music is by The Outbursts and was used with permission. So until next time on Fallacious Trump, we'll leave the last word to the Donald.
That's right. Go home to mommy. Bye. Bye.
Lowe's knows how to help you save. This July 4th, get up to 40% off select Whirlpool kitchen appliances. Plus, get an additional 10% off when you buy 2 or 3 select major appliances. And when you buy 4 or more, you'll save an additional 20%. Find the right appliances and features that fit your kitchen's unique needs and style. Shop Whirlpool 4th of July deals at Lowe's. Valid through 7/9. See Lowe's.com for details. Savings vary based on purchase amount. Selection varies by location.